What's up, Tailgaters? My name is Tailgate Nate, and welcome to my channel. Happy New Year, everybody. I think I said that in my Ohio State fan reaction video, but again, Happy New Year. Welcome to the calendar year of 2023, and we got a great college football game to open 2023. It's the national championship game in Los Angeles in SoFi Stadium. You got the reigning national champion Georgia Bulldogs here, trying to go back-to-back. First time anyone's done so since Alabama did it in 2011, 2012. And on the other side, you got the TCU Horned Frogs, the Cinderella story going strong. A team that won 5 games last season is in the national championship game in Sonny Dykes' first year. The only question remains, tomorrow, are the reigning champs going to be lifting yet another college football playoff trophy? Or is the slipper going to fit Cinderella, and will TCU be not only the first Big 12 team to win a game in the college football playoff era, but also to win a game that is more important, the national championship? We're going to break down 5 keys to the game for each team, and I'm going to predict this game for you. But before we dive into that, I just want to say, guys, this is the last college football game of the 2022-2023 season. After this, I'm going to start breaking down some stuff that has already transpired during the time where we do not have games kicking off. So if you guys want to hear me talk transfers, head coaches, maybe even some fun videos like ways we can fix college football's overtime, I want to make a video on that. I got some video ideas planned, and I'm going to try to get as much of it done as possible. So you want to make sure you hit that subscribe button so you get an influx of college football content for the 8 months that we do not have games kicking off here. And also, guys, if you just flat out enjoy this video or want to support me in any way, you're doing one right now by watching this video. But you can also like, comment, of course, subscribe, ring the bell, share my videos. Any way you interact with the channel helps to support me. So I very much so appreciate it. Let's dive into predicting the national championship game. But first up, though, a little recap of the playoff semifinals. And honestly, New Year's Eve could not have been a better day for college football in terms of the college football playoff semifinals. Michigan and TCU. Let's start with the Verbo Fiesta Bowl over on this side. This is a game that a lot of people expected Michigan to win and their physicality to be able to take over. And that was not the case. TCU used a lot of explosive plays and really outmatched a Michigan defense that just did not seem ready to play. TCU also using a couple pick sixes to help them as well, as they went on to beat the Big Ten champs 51-45, holding Michigan off late to advance to the national championship game. Again, not a lot of people were giving this team a shot against Michigan, and even fewer people are giving this team a shot against the team that just went and beat Ohio State in the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl. And it also doesn't help that they're reigning national champs. Yeah, that's right. The Georgia Bulldogs are back in the big game for the 2nd straight year after beating the Ohio State Buckeyes in a thriller. The Buckeyes controlled the game for most of the time. C.J. Stroud was playing with his hair on fire, but Georgia did what Georgia does best, and that is go win the 4th quarter. It did that. It came up with some key stops late, and even though Ohio State was able to drive in the field goal range there with 8 seconds left, Noah Ruggles a chance for the game-winning field goal, and he shanks it. Not a very good kick, although you can make the case on why the holder never got it down. I thought Noah Ruggles put it in the only spot that really gave him a chance to make the kick, but none of that matters. What matters is the kick did not go in, and that is why Georgia is sitting here after a come-from-behind victory against Ohio State to try to repeat for their 2nd straight national championship game, and Georgia knows it can play a lot better than it did against Ohio State. And I think TCU is kind of thinking the same way there as well. I think both of these teams, yes, they played pretty darn well, especially in stages where they had to in their playoff semifinal games. But I don't think we saw the best version of either team in their playoff semifinal game. And I'll explain why and more. We're going to dive into 5 keys to the game for both teams. And we're going to start with the team that you see on my right, the TCU Horned Frogs. Of course, their only loss on the year coming in the Big 12, my apologies, championship game to the Kansas State Wildcats, who ended up going to lose to Bama in the All-State Sugar Bowl. But that aside, what does TCU have to do in order to walk out of here with its first national championship since, I believe, 1930, 1940 something? Well, for starters, I think Max Duggan has to play better than he did against the Big Ten champs, the Michigan Wolverines. Now, that's saying something because Max Duggan had some pretty good throws and some pretty good scrambles with his legs there as well. But there were also times where Max Duggan was not the best version of himself in that playoff semifinal game on New Year's Eve. His stat line reads as follows. He was 14 of 29 for 225 yards, had 2 touchdowns, but also had 2 picks. Now, the 2 picks were kind of like tip drill picks, so I'm not really equating those in here, but he did make some pretty dangerous throws. He also missed some wide open guys there as well, was overthrowing some receivers, and generally just didn't look comfortable early. Yet Max Duggan was able to settle himself down in late stages and make some really good throws, especially when TCU needed drives to stay alive, or in the late stages of the game where TCU needed their absolute warrior of a leader the most. Now, Tailgate Nate, what do you mean by better? Well, I think Max Duggan has got to have a higher completion percentage than what he did against Michigan. He's got to be able to complete passes against this Georgia secondary that is going to look to have something to prove after their performance against Ohio State. We'll talk more about that later. Secondly, I think he's got to show a lot more dual threat ability. Not that he didn't in the playoff game against Michigan, but I think you got to keep this Georgia defense guessing. That's what kind of surprised Georgia about C.J. Stroud and Ohio State. C.J. Stroud, not a quarterback really known for getting out of the pocket and creating with his legs, yet that's exactly what he did. So Max Duggan, of course, they're going to be prepared for both sides of Max Duggan because he's shown it. Keep them on their toes. Keep the play calling unpredictable. If whether Kendre Miller is healthy or not, the Frogs' run game has got to find a smooth rhythm. Ohio State was never really able to find that, although there were some good moments in that run game for the Ohio State Buckeyes. What the TCU Horned Frogs have to do is be able to out-physicality Georgia, which is something that, well, not a lot of people, heck, if anybody in college football can do. This TCU O-line has got to be able to create gaps for not only Max Duggan to be able to buy him time, but create gaps for the running backs as well, be able to pass protect, give Max Duggan time. So yes, this second bullet point focuses on the run game, but you can even branch it down to the offensive line as well. The offensive line has got to be able to protect. You got to be able to stop that madman of a human being in Jalen Carter. Could make the case for being the overall #1 pick now that the Chicago Bears have that pick. The TCU's offensive line has got to be ready for a physical challenge. Got to be able to open holes for Kendre Miller, Amari DiMercato, and whoever happens to be running the football, including Max Duggan for this TCU team. On to the wide receivers now. I think Quentin Johnson and some of these other playmakers that TCU has have got to go up and win some 50-50 balls. We were keyed on the matchup last game out of Georgia between Kelee Ringo and Marvin Harrison Jr. And boy, was that a matchup to watch when we got it. The matchup is going to be Kelee Ringo against Quentin Johnston now. And Quentin Johnston, you could still make the case why he is one of, if not the best receiver in all of college football. Again, I believe that belongs to Marvin Harrison. No discredit to what Quentin Johnston has done this season. He's been amazing. He's probably going to end up being a first-round draft pick, but so is Kelee Ringo. So the Max Duggan is going to have to be able to make some of those tough throws, but also just trust his playmakers, especially a guy like Quentin Johnston, who is just such a weapon. Be able to win some of those 50-50 balls and be able to swing those plays their way. That's what the wide receivers of TCU have got to do against this Georgia secondary that I think is going to play a lot better than what they played. They just got torched for, what was it, almost 400 yards against Ohio State, albeit C.J. Stroud played with his hair on fire. Okay, 348, so not as bad as I thought, but Georgia's secondary allowed 10.2 yards per pass. That's something that they definitely know they can cut back on, and I think will. So TCU's got to take advantage of moments where Georgia's secondary may not look as sharp. On to the TCU defensive side. The TCU defense may have to come up with a few takeaways and or defensive touchdowns. That's exactly what they did in the game against Michigan, right? They had 2 pick sixes, and that helped them ultimately win the game. But TCU has done that all season long. They've had kick returns when they've needed them. They've had punt returns. They've had interception returns. They've had scoop and scores. TCU's defense and special teams have helped them win games all season long, and it's got to come up huge again today. Not only is this TCU defense going to have to play pretty well because, again, Georgia's storyline is their defense, but their offense is pretty good too. So what has to happen with TCU? You got to play good defense as well. You got to be able to go stride for stride with the beast. And then ultimately, guys, the Frogs have nothing else to lose. No one expected them to a lot of people didn't even expect them to make a bowl game. No one expected them to be in the college football playoff, and to that very few minority who are, probably mostly TCU fans, I don't think anybody expected them to be in the national championship game. This is solely, if you can win this one, what a storyline it would be, and what a moment it would be for this program and for Sonny Dykes. But in my opinion, if you are TCU, go play hard for 60 minutes and see where you're at. If it's a national championship and you do all those things above, or let me rephrase that. If you do all those things above and do it exceptionally well, you may be walking away with a national championship. If not, well, then it may lead to Georgia getting their back-to-back, but this is a lot to build on for TCU. Moving on to Georgia, though, who didn't really have the majority of the pressure now when you played Ohio State, because Ohio State had a monkey on their back. There were people all over them kind of questioning their identity. Georgia didn't have that in that first game. I'm not saying that they necessarily have that here, but I do think that the pressure is more so on Georgia than on TCU. Everyone expects Georgia to go win this game and the repeat as national champions. But again, I think TCU is going to make it closer. Here's what I have to say about the Georgia Bulldogs. First, you got to let Stetson Bennett's experience factor speak for itself and let it take over when it needs to. Stetson Bennett is, 25 years old, 24, 25 years old. The man has been through the landscape of college football, to say the least, and he knows what it takes to not only win these big games, but heck, again, guys, he just won a national championship last year, so let Stetson Bennett's experience factor take over when it needs to. It definitely did in that game against Ohio State, as Stetson Bennett went 23 of 34, almost 400 yards passing against the Buckeye secondary with 3 touchdowns and 1 interception, albeit he was helped by a couple lapses in the Buckeye secondary in that last game. But the fact of the matter is, Stetson Bennett is a very good college-level quarterback, and he's going to be able to get the job done for the Georgia Bulldogs. And again, if you are the TCU defense, you got to be able to limit what Stetson Bennett is going to be able to do. For Georgia, limit mistakes and miscues. There are a couple throws that Stetson Bennett, I know he would like to have back if he were to be redoing that Ohio State game again. But moving now on into the national championship, I do believe they're going to be able to limit those mistakes and miscues, but it's still a key because, as we talked about with TCU, they are able to capitalize when you probably don't expect them to capitalize. Again, punt return touchdowns, interception return touchdowns, fumble return touchdowns. TCU, when you turn the football over on them, they make you pay. So limit the mistakes, limit the miscues, and just play what Georgia's been most of the year. And that's a good, solid, clean, and physical team, might I add. And speaking of physical, get the run game and Brock Bowers involved early and often. Now, it didn't hurt Georgia in the end. They still were able to beat Ohio State. But Brock Bowers only had 4 catches, and I believe 2 or 3 of those came really late in that game. So be able to get Brock Bowers going early, especially now without Darnell Washington, the tight end that got injured against Ohio State. Get guys like Arian Smith and Kenny McIntosh involved, especially McIntosh in the run game. He's really good. But the best tight end in the nation in Brock Bowers, you got to get him going early and often. Be able to have him as a legitimate threat. Not that he isn't, but he just kind of wasn't for most of the game against Ohio State. If you can get Brock Bowers involved in this game early, the TCU defense is going to have their hands full. Now, onto the Dogs secondary, or onto the Dogs defense, but yes, that first bullet point, or the fourth bullet point, I should say, is referencing their secondary. They're going to need to clamp down Quentin Johnson, the man to do that. Kelee Ringo, a projected first-round NFL draft pick, but you got to be wary of other weapons there as well. Again, TCU went through the first 5 games of the season really without Quentin Johnson being a factor at all, and then they've only gotten better offensively when Johnson has started to find himself in that offense, and that's paved the way for a lot of these other playmakers on the TCU side of things to be able to find their rhythm and get going. If Kendre Miller is healthy, that's a guy you got to worry about, but you also got to worry about Amari DiMercato in the backfield. They got guys like Jordan Hudson and Tay Barber and Darius Davis, and although those guys had little to no impact in the game against Michigan, it was mostly Quentin Johnson who had 163 yards. You still got to be wary of some of the other weapons that TCU is going to be able to throw at you. And if you're TCU, yes, of course, get Quentin Johnson involved. He is your weapon. He's your go-to guy. But you got to be able to get some of those other weapons a little bit more involved than you did against Michigan as well. Also for Georgia, you got to limit the explosiveness of this TCU offense, right? They are an explosive offense, just looking at plays here, a 69-yard run. I believe DiMercato had a couple really nice long runs. Quentin Johnson on that 76-yard touchdown catch. And then, of course, the 2 pick sixes there as well. You got to limit the explosiveness of TCU, keep the ball out of the hands of their offense, and just overall adjust from how you played the game against Ohio State. Ohio State, in my opinion, definitely might prove to be a tougher opponent than what TCU is. But TCU's got some things that Ohio State doesn't, and Georgia's got to be prepared for it. And again, Stetson Bennett, I think, said that, well, Georgia did not necessarily play their best game. They definitely are more than capable of playing a lot better than the way they played Ohio State, and I think they're going to show that here in the national championship game. All right, I've been dropping hints as to what my prediction is all video long. Here it is, the national championship preview. What to watch for in this game? Well, I think if anything, guys, TCU has shown that they are going to fight until that clock hits triple zeros. And I don't care what the score is. If it's 31-32 with 3 minutes left and TCU has the ball, or if they're getting blown out 50-0, TCU is going to fight. They're going to put their heart and soul into this game. What more do they have to really strive for? They've already busted every single prediction that everyone has made for TCU this season. Why not go ahead and cap it off with a national championship, right? They're going to play their absolute souls out. But Georgia, I do fully believe, is going to adjust and play a better game. Now, again, it's crazy to sit here and say that Georgia's back-to-back national champs just won a playoff semifinal game and yet didn't play their best game. Their defense can definitely play a whole lot better. At times, it got a little conservative in the game against Ohio State, but also Georgia can go ahead and limit the explosive power. You saw a very explosive offense if you're a Georgia Bulldog fan when you went and played Ohio State. You're going to see another one here when you play TCU. So adjust, play maybe a little bit more aggressive defensively. I don't know if that's quite the right term to put it. I'm sure you Georgia fans out there know what I may be referencing. The storyline and headline before this game kicks off. Can Stetson Bennett and the Dogs do it again, or will the Frogs be the king of the ball? Will the slipper fit the Frogs? And I think your headline on Tuesday morning when you wake up, Georgia's the 12.5-point favorite, over under 63. Again, that is as of recording this video. It's always subject to change. I do think TCU is going to beat that spread. Now, I'm not throwing betting advice out there. It's just my personal prediction. I do think TCU is going to end up beating that spread and make this a competitive game. I think they showed that in full in the game against Michigan. However, I think your storyline when you wake up on Tuesday morning is going to be the Dogs are the first team to go back-to-back since 2011 and 2012. I believe the Georgia Bulldogs will be able to, in the late stages of this game, especially when things may be getting down to the wire or getting nail-biting, I think Georgia's going to be able to out-physicality TCU. I think they're going to be able to do what they did against Ohio State. And in the end, if this game does come down to which team is going to win the fourth quarter, I think the last, I think each team's last game here shows you who is more capable of winning the fourth quarter as of right now. And to me, that is the Georgia Bulldogs. They were fantastic in that fourth quarter against Ohio State. TCU left a little bit to be desired. They came out of the gate hot, and then it's just offenses sputtering back and forth. So I believe that this game is going to be close heading into the fourth quarter, and then Georgia's going to do what they do best. They're going to go win that fourth quarter, and I believe that Georgia will be repeating as the national champions of college football, going for the three-peat in 2023-2024. But again, we are a long way away from discussing that. TCU and the Horned Frogs put up a really, really good fight, but the slipper just doesn't quite fit yet, and the Georgia Bulldogs go back-to-back in college football. So there's my mega preview and prediction. Let me know what you guys think about this national championship game in the comment section below. Taking a final look at the college football playoff bracket. One of these teams is going to be hosting that national championship trophy. Will it be the Georgia Bulldogs or will it be the TCU Horned Frogs? Let me know. I have a poll on my community tab where you can answer that question, or you can leave your answer down in the comment section below. As always, guys, remember to play hard but tailgate harder. I will probably end up doing a community post updates as this game is going along, and I may do a video, I may not. We'll see. I'll let you guys know how I'm feeling on Monday. But anyway, guys, take care. Have a good rest of your night, and enjoy the national championship game tomorrow. Goodbye.